thousands of job opportunities available on sites like LinkedIn or Indeed, the job application process can feel incredibly overwhelming. So, how can job applicants clearly define their search and separate themselves from the crowd? One place to start is with a 5-star resume. On this week's episode of Yuptown, we speak with resume writer and JobStars founder Doug Levin, who shares his tips for developing resume content and targeting a job search. With his 10,000 hours of resume writing experience behind him, Doug helps job hunting hopefuls define past roles and target future goals to land exciting new opportunities. I'm Victoria Principato, and this is Yuptown. Well, Doug, thank you so much for joining me today on Yuptown.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Victoria.
Very excited to get started for this conversation because I think it will be so beneficial to all my listeners, myself included. So maybe we'll kick things off by first, you can tell me a little bit about yourself and what led you to found JobStars.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So I went to the University of Kansas, graduated in 2005. So I've been in the working world for about 17 years now. During that time, so I came out of undergrad and I joined a company called Career Builder.
And what
Uh,
did you study undergrad? Just business management?
Actually, I got a bachelor's in history.
Whoa,
So I
I
think
find that so interesting. And then when that's kind of applied to a business setting, it can be really helpful and holistic. But sorry to interrupt you. Continue.
in my case, it was really just a matter of interest, and I didn't really kind of elect that for my career path. It was just something that I was interested in because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do.
Mm.
But so it was 2005. I joined a company called Career Builder. At the time, Career Builder was, pretty recognizable name in the kind of recruiting and job search space. In 2005, this is at a period of time when the internet's, basically, for all intents and purposes, 5 years old, coming off of 2000. And so Career Builder really shook up the whole recruitment and job search world at the time. So it was a pretty exciting place to be, a new emerging company in this new emerging internet landscape.
Wow, that's exciting. So sorry, just for those of us that don't know, can you tell us a little bit more about what Career Builder does?
Yeah, so Career Builder, especially at that time, was basically a company that would help recruiters or companies find employees. So, they're essentially that typical kind of job board. They had a number of different services and products, all helping, customers being large companies looking to recruit.
Mm. So you were in a sales function within that organization.
The funny thing happened in 2008. The financial crisis hit, but so there were layoffs impending, and Career Builder at the time was a company of about 2,000 people. They were planning to lay off about 400 people, and I was one of those that unfortunately they were going to be letting go. As it so happened, another employee left the company concurrently with this all happening, and a spot basically opened up, and that manager asked if I wanted to fill that role. And that role was managing their service. It was called CB Resume. So they had a resume writing service where they would, sell resumes, or the ability to develop a professional resume for clients. So
Mm.
that's how I kind of got into the world of career services. It was totally by chance, just happenstance. I was about to lose my job, and this opportunity opened up, and they're like, "Hey, do you want to run this business? It's called CB Resume." I was like, "Yeah, it sounds pretty cool. Let's do it."
That's really serendipitous. And I think that those situations kind of fall into place and it kind of makes it feel like, right place, right time, and it's just kind of meant to be. So could you tell me a little bit about, I guess, what kind of services JobStar offers? And then I would love to get into a little bit more about what you see on people's resumes and like how we can best present ourselves to be the best candidates in the competitive job market or today.
Yeah, absolutely. So my business, JobStars, is a career services practice. So I help individual job seekers, entry level through executive level. That's resume writing, cover letters, LinkedIn profiles. I offer services like resume distribution for sending your resume to recruiters, building a professional biography if you have an online website, things like that, as well as career coaching. So interview prep, making a career change, if you're in a spot where you're looking to identify a new career path, whether it's the kind of the functional role you're in or the industry that you're in, and you need help and support to make that transition. So everything that I do is built around helping individual job seekers uh, become more marketable and achieve their job search goals.
I mean, so powerful. It sounds like it really captures a lot of different areas, right? Because sometimes I think I compartmentalize a resume. Resume is just a piece of paper. You send it out. You can, mass apply on LinkedIn, but it's so much more than that. You have to be really targeted in your language, how you're packaging your past experiences, what you want to highlight, and if you are trying to like make a shift, or if you're trying to jump into different industries, you have to try to format and word your past experiences really strategically. So it's really nice to know that there are services out there that can kind of help candidates do that. Because I don't know about you, but I feel like it can be so overwhelming these days. LinkedIn just has opened so many different doors, it can almost become addictive to apply to jobs.
Yeah, totally. And that's the trap I think a lot of job seekers fall into. And, there are sites like Indeed or ZipRecruiter or even LinkedIn, which are very convenient. You'll see hundreds of jobs at a time and it's easy to kind of search and apply. But, you have to think about the fact that, your peers, your competitors are also doing the same thing. And so, there are a lot of resources now to search for jobs, and we can talk about that. I have some maybe tips and strategies to help your listeners, find multiple ways and methods of searching for jobs, marketing yourself, communicating your message, and hopefully getting an interview.
That's so great. So that's the perfect segue. Let's get into it. Let's start with, what are the top three biggest mistakes that you see on people's resumes?
Yeah, so I think the first biggest mistake or issue would be building a resume that's not ATS friendly.
Mm.
So ATS stands for Applicant Tracking System. And an applicant tracking system essentially is software that a company uses to manage the flow of applications coming in and out. One of the main features of an applicant tracking system is the ability to automate the process of evaluating your resume. So instead of human eyeballs, reviewing every resume and making a determination, they're using, an applicant tracking system, and that algorithm can review resumes against the job description that they're hiring for to determine if you're a quality candidate for the role or not.
And so does that also apply to the content of the actual document itself? Like, say if someone were applying for a role, would you want to pull from language of that uh, job posting? Because I've heard that's a tip or trick, but I don't know that people have the bandwidth to do that. But maybe that gets a little bit more into the strategy of applying itself.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. So that's part of kind of marketing, the branding, using the right wording definitely matters in terms of being scoring well with applicant tracking systems. So the first part is you want to just make sure that your document is free of potential distortions. Once you've done that, then yeah, selecting the right keywords based on your functional role, evaluating the job description, trying to mirror the job description with the words that you use on your resume. These are all things that you can do to help improve, your scoring with applicant tracking systems. It's a slippery slope, at the same time, because you don't want to spend hours and hours, tweaking your resume for one job description, because that can be kind of limiting. Whereas you could take that time that you're using evaluate or editing your resume and find 5 or 10 other jobs to apply to. So,
Mhm.
you want to be careful about that. But yeah, selecting the right keywords is really important in terms of scoring well with applicant tracking systems.
Awesome. So that's a great first pointer. What would be your second tip for, yeah, biggest mistakes you see on a resume? How can we kind of correct those?
Sure. So the second one would be appropriate structure. So when you're building your resume, imagine the individual job descriptions. Lots of times people will just use bullet points. So bullet after bullet after bullet, and you might see 8 or 10 different bullet points for a job description. And what we want to do is make it easy for the reader to understand the information that's on your resume. So what I recommend is a kind of a combination of, you would provide a high level description of your duties and responsibilities. So first, you want to help people understand what's the scope of your role? Like, what did you do? What were you responsible for? Almost as if there was like a job description from the company saying, here was what I was responsible for. And then once you've established what it is that you're responsible for, then you can use bullet points for key achievements. And these are going to be standout accomplishments, whether they're quantifiable achievements, whether they're projects you led, whatever it may be, something that goes beyond just kind of the standard description of your role. That way you're giving readers not only what you've done, but like how well you've done it and how well you've performed.
That's awesome. So yeah, just making sure that we're breaking down our descriptions accurately and succinctly, but also in an orderly fashion too. I think that's really key. So how many, I guess, bullet points max would you recommend per job description?
It depends a little bit on, how long you were in the role.
Mm,
Um, but, kind of like to me, three is the magic number. You can start with three and kind of work your way either more or less. When you're selecting key bullet points or key achievements, these should be things that you want to talk about in an interview. Because very likely, when you apply to a job and let's say you have an initial interview on the phone, the reviewer might ask you specifically about a bullet point from your resume. So when you're selecting, key highlights and key achievements, think about that. Think about, well, if I were in an actual interview, could I tell the story of this achievement? Could I make this shine? That sort of thing.
that's very useful. Okay, so mistake number two that you see are disorganized job descriptions, overwhelming descriptions. So the fix is to make those more succinct and defined. So that's definitely super useful. So let's get on to that third biggest mistake that you see on resumes.
Sure. So I think the third biggest mistake oftentimes is length. So too long, often cases is the case. So like a 3 page or 2.5 page resume, sometimes even longer. You know, um, but trying to keep the resume succinct, reader friendly, attractive. Sometimes we think about the resume in a vacuum, and so we forget that there are these other resources. For instance, your LinkedIn profile is a very valuable resource in the job search process in terms of marketing yourself. So, we want to kind of scale it back, focus on what matters, make it easier for the reviewer to just kind of get what they need. So thinking about scaling the resume down and then sometimes offloading some information over to your LinkedIn profile and thinking about your resume and LinkedIn as working in tandem with one another.
Mm.
Your resume isn't on an island. It's just kind of the opening kind of foray into, you apply, they look at your resume, and then if they're interested, usually most hiring managers live on LinkedIn. So they'll check out your LinkedIn profile, and there you can have maybe more details, more projects, what have you.
I really like that. Yeah, thinking of both of those assets as working together.
Yeah, and sometimes I will say like the resume is kind of your appetizer and the
Mm,
LinkedIn is kind of the full course. LinkedIn has, let's say, different categories, for instance. So there's like a project section on LinkedIn where you can have long form projects or, there's different categories and you're not so space confined. So you might think about as the LinkedIn contains all the information. You still want to be concise when you're actually describing things on LinkedIn, but it's a container for a lot of different information. And then the resume is kind of like, the appetizer, give you a taste, and just the whole goal of the resume is just to land you an interview, to attract attention and just get you into the interview. So,
okay, so to summarize, we'll say that mistake number three is that the resumes are too long. Try to keep them targeted down to one page max and use your LinkedIn as the main course, categorizing all your projects, getting a little more in depth. That's definitely really helpful for us all to kind of keep in mind as we are as editing our resumes, keeping them up to date. So do you have any advice for people who are currently in the job application process? What can applicants be doing to make themselves the best possible candidates?
yeah, so I think one thing, aside, we've talked a lot about the resume and, your LinkedIn profile. So let's say you have a really, a good resume and LinkedIn profile that you feel confident in, the next step is how you go about the job search. And that is what separates, one job seeker from the next. And so I think it's about embracing using multiple sources of searching for jobs.
Mhm.
So, the kind of standard approach is going to Indeed or LinkedIn or ZipRecruiter, searching for a job and applying to a job. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that these are very highly trafficked platforms, and a lot of your competitors are doing the very same thing. So, a typical LinkedIn job will have 50 plus applicants easily. So this is like a very path of least resistance. It's frankly just easy to do, to sit online, search, and apply to jobs. And so you want to think about, what are these other things that you can do to be in not such a competitive environment? How can you break through in different ways? So there's a lot of different things that you can do to just mix up your job search. So instead of just relying and I'm not saying you can't apply to jobs on ZipRecruiter or LinkedIn, just make that a part of a bigger strategy of
Mm.
doing multiple different things. One thing is reaching out to recruiters. Another thing is identifying companies that you want to work for.
Mm.
So instead of taking the approach of, I'm going to go to ZipRecruiter and search and apply for jobs, you want to take a different approach and start to think about what are the companies that I want to work for? What industry are they in? What size of company do I want to work for? Are they values based? Are they whatever, whatever things you care about? And then you want to start to just build a list of 25, 50, 100 different companies. That actually takes a lot of effort, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, and so the key to that is, um, you know every company essentially nowadays, lists all their jobs, all their vacant jobs on their website. So, you know
Mm.
any average company, they may not be paying like a LinkedIn or a ZipRecruiter or an Indeed to actually advertise the job. So unless you're going to the company website and looking at the jobs on the company website, you might be missing opportunities. So there might be a company that you would love to work for, um, but if you're just searching on Indeed, it might never show up because they might only just have the job on their company job board. And that's a much more effective way to avoid the crowds on those major platforms.
I really like that tip because it helps seekers become a little more targeted, and that kind of helps make the search feel a little more attainable, I think.
Yeah, and it puts you in the driver's seat, like
Yes.
how you're in control instead of like searching and responding to the opportunities that are online. You're, in control. You're saying, okay, I've identified what industry I want to work in. I've identified what size company I want to work for. And now it's just simply, doing the research to find these different companies. And
Hmm.
then, when you search and apply, let's say you have a passion for the outdoors. Okay, and so you decide I want to work for an outdoors company. That becomes part of your pitch. You're not just, a product manager applying to a job. You're now a product manager applying to a job with an interest in this industry because you've been in the outdoors or you love the outdoors or what have you. And so that just strengthens your case when you know what you want.
So Doug, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. I really appreciate all of the tips and advice that you've provided. But how can listeners get in touch with you and how can they make use of your services?
Yeah, my company is JobStars USA. We're a career services practice. I work with all my clients directly. So I'm kind of like the lead resume writer. I've done over 10,000 hours behind the computer as a practicing resume writer, and so I've worked with all different types of clients. You know, Building the resume, building the cover letter, building the LinkedIn profile. That's what I do. So I'm easy to get a hold of. Just check out jobstars.com. There you'll see the full menu of services with FAQs, more information about me, and my blog has a ton of helpful information as well.
That's awesome. Again, we'll put links to your website, to your blog in the show description. I can say that you've been awesome to work with and to learn from. So thank you so, so much for your time and for sharing with everyone. This has been awesome.
Thanks, Victoria. I enjoyed it. I appreciate it.
To learn more about Doug's services at JobStars, check out his link in the episode description. And if you enjoyed this week's episode, give us a like or follow on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. I'm Victoria Principato, and this is Yucktown.